And welcome to the new edition of the Reigns on the Cardinals podcast. Rob Reigns, Mike Reigns here as we come to you in the middle of November. Some news going on, Mike, down in San Antonio, where the Cardinals general managers and the Brain Trust all meeting for the general managers meeting, kind of really the official kickoff to the offseason after the World Series. And John Moxley making some news with an announcement about Wilson Contreras.
Yeah, it sounds like all the indications are Wilson Contreras is going to move to play first base. And it's a move right off the bat that leaves more questions than it does answers.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first thing you say is, okay, Contreras had a no-trade clause in the contract, and we had known earlier on in the offseason that with the Cardinals be free agents, or not free agents, they had on no trade contracts. Sorry, I had a computer glitch there I was trying to fix. And decide what their future was, if they wanted to stay with the club as they went through the reset process, or were they interested in moving on to another club. The four of those guys, Michaelis, Arenado, Contreras, and Sonny Gray. Contreras is really the first one now that we know that expressed a desire to stay with the Cardinals, but with the understanding that he's not going to catch anymore.
And I think, you look at it in two ways, right? One way is you're happy that he decided, hey, I want to stay. I believe in this organization. I believe in the value of the young kids, and I want to stay and help this team. So you're happy of that fact. But the question marks that it opens up to me is, one, what does this mean for Luken Baker and or Alec Burleson? Does that mean that they're trying to look to move one of them now, or does one of them stay? The comments made it sound like Mo still also wants to carry three catchers. So what does this mean for Pedro Pages and Ivan Herrera?
It did sound like from some of the comments that Mo told the people who were in San Antonio was that he would not expect him to be catching very often. So I think you're going to see primarily first base DH. Like you said, we kind of, at the moment, with Paul Goldschmidt, obviously a free agent and not expected to return, you kind of look at the Cardinals' options. And you and I both thought, well, you're looking at a Burleson-Baker platoon at first base. And he did say that if chances are, if Burleson would still play some first base, probably on days that Contreras is DHing, and vice versa. But I think the way that Burleson played last year, you need to probably find a little bit more of a regular spot for him in the lineup.
And maybe the thought process there is the way that Burleson played, his trade value is never going to be higher. So is he someone that you can move to get a solid piece back? Because to me, it's kind of odd that you're using Contreras in the DH spot when right now I feel like you got a lot of guys that can play DH.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really plug all the holes, right? Because, you could put anybody in that role between Walker and Gorman and
anyway, they've generally used it as a spot to give guys a day off of their field and not have really a full-time DH. Like you could see Walker, in there at some point too. But I think that the interesting thing to me is, though, it's Contreras. I like the fact that you're going to probably continue to have Contreras' bat in the lineup, because when he was healthy, the last couple of years, he was one of the Cardinals' more effective offensive players. But I just don't think that first base is necessarily the spot. I like Herrera. I like Pages as the catcher's combination. But I don't know. Something tells me that we don't have the final answer about this yet.
And we probably don't, the way it's all going to work out in itself. And I know that Mo was saying that this was primarily a medical decision because they believe that Contreras will be able to not get hurt, knock on wood, not catching. It's not as a demanding position. And, he is, 32 years old. So, it gives you a little bit more length. You got another 3 years on that contract, so it gives you some time to keep him here. And like you said, when he's healthy, his bat is good. And I think you could probably argue that a healthy Wilson Contreras offensively is better than a Alec Burleson or Luken Baker offensively. So I understand why they're trying to do it. It just doesn't really make the most sense right now.
Two other things I think that are interesting to kind of talk about and kind of come out of the decision about Contreras to stay. We talked about number one is what's the future of the other three players who have no trade contracts, Arenado, Gray, and Michaelis. Obviously, those three, I think Michaelis is probably the most difficult to trade. He has 1 year left on his contract. Arenado, 2 years left, right? 3 years, 25, 26, 27. So a lot of money in that contract. So it'll be interesting to see, what those guys do. Gray, 2 years left. So, but based on that, and based on what the other comment that Mosaic said down in San Antonio was, quote, I don't think that our team is going to be that much different. So if you read into that, we talked about, we not knowing how much of the money they wanted to cut off the payroll from a year ago. Maybe they've done enough. maybe they don't need to cut any more salary. Maybe, the 50 million, 60 million that they're saving by the free agents and the, declining the options on Wynn and Gibson and Milton. Maybe that's enough money. Maybe we've seen the cost cutting, done.
And as we've said before, it wouldn't surprise any of us if you went into this season with Andre Palante scheduled in as your fifth starter. And as you sit today, that's the way this team looks. And so I think it's certainly an interesting comment from Mo when you say, this team's not going to look that much different. Maybe they're feeling a little bit more confident in just making a few subtle changes here and there and trying to roll forward with what they have.
And it also seemed like he was saying that he expects at least the club to be better maybe than a lot of other people do next year.
Well, I think there's two key pieces of this, right? Wilson Contreras is a key piece because he was out for a lot of the season. And when he was here, his bat was very good and very helpful. And Nolan Arenado was a huge piece of this season because he did not play well until maybe the last month of the season. And that's about it. So if he's here and if he's playing better, those are two big bats in this lineup that are MVP caliber bats.
Mo did say that he had conversations now, as he said he would, with all of those potential, no trade clause guys. We don't know what the results of those conversations were, other than Contreras obviously saying that he wanted to stay. So stay tuned. There'll be more developments. We'll either know soon because they'll either get traded or they'll be here, one or the other.
And I think if they stay, I think there's a lot of exciting pieces to this team, right? Because to me, the only concern of staying is the way that Miles Michaelis pitched last year, because that's not going to help you for the long term of the season. And I'm also not convinced that Andre Palante is a long-term starter. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But I think there's a couple concerns to that side. But on the positive side, Nolan Arenado is an MVP caliber player when he plays like it. Is the potential still there for him? That remains to be seen. But it can be.
Well, obviously, the offseason off to a start here, and we'll have to kind of monitor what happens between now and spring training. Still a long time to go. As I say, I don't think we've heard the final decision on a lot of these decisions yet. A couple other things off the field have happened this week to kind of, I think, in good news for the Cardinals. Number one, the first thing is that they announced on Thursday they've completed a new renegotiated agreement with FanDuel Sports Network, what used to be Bowie Sports Network, to continue to broadcast the games on cable and for the first time ever have a direct-to-consumer market product. So everybody who was cut the cord and not on cable anymore still wanted to get the Cardinal games. Anybody who lives outside the metro area or had been subject to blackouts before, apparently now we'll have a model going forward that people can get those games.
It's a very exciting thing, and it's a very helpful thing for this club, right? Because one of the biggest concerns that Mo and the DeWitts had said is that the payroll is going to go down because we don't know what this TV deal looks like. Well, now we know that this TV deal is locked in. Now we know that it's set, and I think it brings some calmness to agreeing to say, you know what, we're okay with the contract that Sonny Gray has because we can afford it now. So now it gives you some flexibility to keep him. And I think that's, looking back at Mo's comment, that would be where some of that came from, is knowing that deal.
And I think in one sense, it is a little bit probably that we haven't seen the final terms, but the Bowie Sports, the old contract, have been scheduled to pay the Cardinals $78 million this year as part of their long-term, broadcasting agreement. I suspect that number is going to go down in the renegotiated deal because obviously Diamond Sports Group trying to come out of bankruptcy. But you can augment whatever money you're getting from them by the direct-to-consumer model. We don't know the price of that either. If you base it on what the people pay for the Blues games on the same network, it's like $20 a month. So how many more extra dollars is that going to bring into the Cardinals to offset the less money that you're getting from Diamond Sports?
Yeah, the interesting thing will be on the terms of the contract is, where's that direct-to-consumer money going? Is that going, via profit share to the Cardinals as well, or is it just going to the FanDuel Sports Network? Which, if it does, then in turn should change the amount that is paid back to the Cardinals. So in theory, that's making them a lot more money. And I think the other thing that, not jumping the gun here, but the other news that I think is also going to be a positive and help the Cardinals here is the passing of Amendment 2 for sports betting.
Yeah, I was going to get to that next. Yeah, I don't know if we really know what that means as far as the Cardinals are concerned or not yet. I mean, obviously it means a good deal for people that want to bet on sports in Missouri, then now we'll have a legal way to do that, whether that's at a casino, whether they're going to build a sports book at Ballpark Village, all that's still to be determined. And how exactly the Cardinals will benefit financially from that, I don't think we know the answer to that yet either, but I'm sure there'll be a way.
I think there will be for sure. And I think the one thing you got to look at too is, if nothing else, you've got between FanDuel and DraftKings and Circa Sports and all of these big betting outlets that are now going to want to come into Missouri to advertise. So the Cardinals, just from a corporate standpoint, from a corporate partnership standpoint, should have a lot of opportunity to create higher revenue just from all of these betting sites wanting to get in. So between sports betting and locking up the regional cable network deal with FanDuel Sports, I think the Cardinals today have to feel a lot better about their payroll going forward than they do 2 weeks ago.
I think it's a little more clarity about both situations that you didn't have before. Yeah. So even if you don't know all the terms and you don't know all of the ramifications, you at least have some idea about what now was going to happen, which they didn't have before. So I do think that will help them make some decisions as far as payroll and plans going forward, which, that's obviously now the next piece of the puzzle is, do you look at who do you look to trade, who do you look to keep? We both don't expect a lot of movement on the free agent market, but I think the setting of the roster now becomes the next, highest priority.
And just by declining the options on the guys and the expired contracts of moving Paul Goldschmidt and stuff, we've already cut $50 million off this budget. So when Mo is saying this team will look very similar, I think what he's saying is that, we've already cut this money. We don't need to cut anymore. We're okay with where we are. I could see some guys, tweaking some deals here and there. To me, the one guy that potentially could come back is Kyle Gibson. I could see him taking a lesser deal to stay in St. Louis. He doesn't live too far from here. And so, I could see him taking a deal to stay. Other than that, I don't really see us making a splash in free agency. Sorry to get your hopes up, but we will not be in the Juan Soto deal. We will not be signing anyone of that caliber.
I would agree with that. I think to me now going forward, the most interesting, I'll give you two players that I'm most interested to see what happens with their future in St. Louis. First one we've already talked about is Arenado, because he controls his own fate. I mean, if he wants to get traded, he can say, I want to get traded. Obviously, there probably will not be 29 other teams that would want to have him because of the financial terms, how much the Cardinals would have to kick in to pay that contract, what kind of product players they would get back in return. We don't know, but I'm curious to see what his future is because of the fact that you talked about all the different DH kind of type players that the Cardinals have. They've also got a whole lot of guys who can play third base. Now, they may not play it at a platinum glove MVP caliber level right away, but Donovan can play third. Gorman came up as a third baseman. I don't think he's going back there, but Walker came up as a third baseman. You've also got a guy named Thomas Ajayci, who's played a lot of third base, who, oh, by the way, is sitting 410 in Arizona as he tries to win the batting title in the Arizona Fall League. But he's got to go somewhere. He got to play somewhere.
They've got a lot of question marks to answer, right? To me, the biggest question mark that I'm looking at right now is, as we sit today with Wilson Contreras moving to first base, who's your opening day starting catcher, Von Herrera or Pedro Paez?
I would say Paez, because I feel like they have more confidence in him as a catcher.
And what's interesting is Paez wasn't really anywhere on this table, kind of like Michael Ciani. They weren't anywhere in this projected setup, but he took full advantage of the opportunity and played very well. Now, is that something he can do for a full season? That will be the question.
The other guys, we get closer to go through November, then you're going to hear more of the trade rumors kick up. And then, of course, the baseball's official winter meetings, early December is when the trade market will really kind of start heating up. I want to know what they're going to do with Ryan Helsley. He's, obviously I'd love to have him back. Obviously a terrific closer, but he's a free agent after next year, going to want a lot of money through arbitration, going to want even more money through free agency after next year. If you don't feel like you're going to be a contending ball club, do you really want to have a $10 million a year or so closer on your team? Or could you send him to the Yankees, send him to the Orioles, send him to Texas, send him to somewhere and load up on prospects? That's the deal I'm waiting to see what happens.
And to me, that's a question. I really think Ryan Helsley is more of a mid-season trade candidate. Because to me, you want to figure out what this team's identity is. And right now, we don't really know if this team can contend or not. Because like we said, there are so many question marks of who ends up where they're going to be that I don't think you're going to lose any ground with Helsley, whether you trade him in the middle of
Yeah,
June.
no, I would say this. The only thing I would say is I think probably with this free agency looming at the end of next year, I suspect, and the fact that you would get more teams involved in the hunt at this point, I would think, I would think there'd be a bigger market for him in December and January than there would be in July, because the more teams will be involved, and you'll also know you would have him for the full season, and maybe potentially re-sign him after that full season as opposed to just getting him as a short-term rental.
And on the flip side, you look at a team like the Yankees. If Luke Weaver hadn't emerged as an all-star great closer for that last month, would a team like the Yankees have gone all in to try to get a Ryan Helsley? So there are potential fits that can happen. But I think that the biggest thing they have to figure out with him is this a team that's going to contend? And if it is, you need that shutdown bullpen.
Or if you're going to trade Ryan Helsley, who becomes your closer? That's the other factor they have.
And I don't know they have one right now.
Right now, I would not say. I don't know who it would be of the current bullpen right now. No,
Not anyone that you're confident enough that when you give the ball to is going to be game over. And that's what you saw every night out of Helsley last year. And we saw how important that was, because this team gave up a lot of runs. And so having a bullpen that can come in and shut people down made a big difference.
One change we made to the website we want to call your attention to is the Facebook page. We've always had STL Sports page, Facebook page, but you figured out a way to kind of link that now onto the front page of the website so you can see the posts right there. And if you're kind of staying off Facebook for a lot of reasons right now, you can kind of have a little happy place where you won't see any of those posts you don't want to see, but you'll see the posts that you do want to see.
And on Facebook, we're trying to post a few questions and just get a little bit more engagement and see what people think. So hopefully you like some of our questions. And if you have a question that you want us to ask or pose out there, please reach out and let us know, and we'll see if we can get that out there as well.
So obviously, we talked about some of the ways that you can get this podcast as well, now available on all of your various platforms for podcasts, and stay, assure you that everything the Cardinals do over the winter, we'll have some reaction to it, either in a story form or here on the Reigns on the Cardinals podcast. So, a couple of things to watch for coming up. I think we're getting closer to making some decisions as far as who new farm director is going to be, director of performance, the two jobs being filled by Rob Cerfolio, the new kind of assistant general manager in charge of the minor leagues. And then, of course, once those positions are in place, we'll kind of see how they're going to restructure the organization in terms of managers at the farm level, some additional coordinators and things like that. So I think it maybe it's not the sexy news that people want on the ball club, but I think it's still very important to the future of this ball club.
And they've also talked about they're not done with changes on the major league coaching staff. So I'll be curious to see what that means and how that shakes out to be, because they're still yet to kind of define John Jay's role. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, obviously he will be some sort of an outfielders coach and working with them and taking the defensive things that Willie McGee did. But does some form of Pop or Stubby shift into a different role and Jay becomes the first base coach, or, what are we left to see there too?
And obviously, some player decisions. You have to set the 40-man roster. You have some Rule 5 questions. They'll have to add Tank Hentz and Tacoa Roby to the 40-man roster, so you don't worry about risk losing them in the Rule 5 draft. But once you get to this point, it seems like it comes awful quick. We had the World Series, then you get the GM meetings, then you get Thanksgiving will be here before you know it. Then you're into the winter meetings, and then you got all the other arbitration deadlines and things like that. So it's you're going to go through this winter pretty quickly, and I think there'll be a lot of news coming out of St. Louis.
Very quickly. And as the news comes, there's a lot of questions, right? Because the other key piece to me, as you talked about before, is you said there's a lot of guys who can play third base. But if Nolan Gorman's going to continue to strike out at 43% rate, that's not going to work for anybody.
No, at any position.
At any position. So, I think there's a lot of question marks of how they see this team shaping up to be. And one question leads to another, right? They all constantly pile up of what happens to Luke and Baker? Well, what happens to Alec Burleson? Well, what happens to Ivan Herrera? Well, what happens to Nolan Arenado?
And it is interesting to watch some of the other moves that the other clubs make as well. Obviously, an old friend of ours, still a longtime friend of the Cardinals, Skip Schumacher, gets a new job this week. He's going to go to Texas. And interestingly, he's a special assistant to the president of baseball operations, not an on-field position. But you put 2 and 2 tea leaves together that maybe Boshi has 1 year left in his contract. Maybe it's now the question that Schumacher becomes manager of the Rangers after next year.
And it also they also said that they're bringing the Marlins bench coach over with him, who was his bench coach down there. So it's all kind of shaping up very similar to how the Padres handled it with Schilt, and happy for Skip to see him get that. And he's odd to see him come on as a senior advisor,
Yeah.
but hopefully it works out.
And obviously, good news for Mike Schill this week as well. He reached a new 2-year contract extension in San Diego, so he's locked in as a manager of the Padres through 2027. So very happy for Mike and the success that he had there. So all eyes will be on the free agent market. Where is Juan Soto going to go? How some of these other free agents are going to go? What's it mean for the Cardinals? Probably not much, but there'll be a lot of other Cardinal news as well coming forward. And be sure we'll have all of it covered for you here on STLSportspage.com. For Mike Raines, this is Rob Raines. Thanks for watching this edition of the Raines on the Cardinals podcast.